Who has been to New York City? They're all in New York City, or most of this. When you looked at the montage in the Alan Jackson song, any pictures really resonate with you guys? There are 3 or 4 that I always, even though I know they're coming, I always look at them a little more closely. Jake?
The one with the woman who's completely covered.
The lady in the business suit completely covered in dust, all right? That's one. Wesley?
So it was like an overhead shot in the sky, and it was like how much like the dust just covered blocks.
Blocks and blocks, all right. Anybody else have one that really, Ben?
It was either the line of policemen or firemen that were saying, I think they were at a funeral, they were crying.
That's when the crusty policemen.
No, they were at a funeral, there was like 3 of them lined up.
Lined up, yeah, I got you. All right, I got you. Eli?
The one with a bunch of people running from the explosion.
All right, just fleeing. Yes,
The
sir.
one with the fireman raising the American flag.
Flag, love that shot. I have it in a couple places around the room. It's over there. I used to be painted in my old classroom. Ones that hit me, there is the lady, she's got the sunglasses and the pink sport coat. She's cradling another lady in her chest, like laying out in the middle of the street. The crusty, bald-headed policeman just openly crying. You know, New York City cop is about as tough as you're ever going to find, just openly crying. There are the policemen or the firemen with like the drywall respirators. Like, what's that going to do? And then at the end, it's the guy looking at all the pictures on the glass wall, just kind of going like this. In 102 minutes, America and the world was forever changed. Does anybody know, did you lose anyone on that day, or someone you know? Like I did. So every September 11th, I add a new flag or a new picture in the room. There will be 42 of them this year. Oh, give me a second. This is Ms. Green's office. Will do, ma'am. Ms. Baker, they need to see you at the front office. And, you know, I'm not going to lie to you. Every September 11th, I get a little anxious. I get a little nervous. I'm like, oh boy, here, you know, especially the 10th anniversary, the 15th anniversary. You can call it whatever you want, but on a plane, I always count, you know, from the exit to where my seat is, how many, in case the lights go out and I have to count my way. If you're in the bathroom for more than 90 seconds, I just radar lock on you. I find a fire extinguisher, right? So if anything would happen, you know, you got 25 feet of propellant and a big hunk of metal. And it's sad that that's the way we have to think, but I want to ask you, what is the word tear? Not terrorist. What is the word tear? What does that mean? Absolute tear. You are terrified. What is that? Kaiser.
When you fear for your life.
When you're total afraid for your life. It's an uncontrollable, where you don't know what to do. It is something that just shocks you. It's not me going up to Wesley and going, boo, all right? That's being afraid. When your mom doesn't turn on your Winnie the Pooh nightlight, all right? You know, that's being scared. But terror is this uncontrollable emotion. You don't know what to do. I'm going to play a few seconds of a video here. This is, you know, shortly after the first plane hit the tower. And you guys have grown up in a world where media streaming is no big deal. Someone gets a fight in the courtyard, and half of you will have your phones out, like live streaming it to, you know, Instagram and Snapdoodle and, you know, whatever, what is that, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatever nonsense is out there. But back then, that stuff was just coming online, and to see this live was kind of shocking. So here you go for a second.
That right there? One of those big heavy things falling at a rate that a piece of paper would not fall. Oh my God! No way. Like that, Caroline, do you see that?
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I mean, who's to say it's not like a chair? Regardless, dude, it's gonna be so dangerous at that base.
Did you see that a second ago? Watch to the right.
Where? Where?
I don't want to keep replaying that. I don't want
That
to.
right there?
I don't want to disturb you, but keep looking over here.
At a rate that a piece of paper would not fall. Oh my God!
No way.
Like that, Caroline, do you see that?
Keep watching right to the right, right over here.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I mean, who's to say it's not like a chair? Regardless, dude, it's gonna be so dangerous.
Right there.
That
You guys
base.
see that?
Oh.
All right.
Obviously.
And then
Oh my God! What? Oh my God! It's terrorist attack! What do we do?
all right, that's Terre. These girls are several blocks away on the other side of the city, and they lose their minds. If you ever get a chance, it's a History Channel called 102 Minutes that it changed America. They were watching the second plane hit live. And if you grew up when I did, the World Trade Centers were these icons of the United States. Were they beautiful pieces of architecture? Not really, right? They're two big giant rectangles sticking up in the sky. But they were called the World Trade Centers because so much business and world trading ran through those two buildings every single day. And if you came in, it's called the old TV show, A Barney Miller Shot, where they dominate all the big buildings in Manhattan. They towered above them all. And September 11th, 2001, I thought was going to be a great day. It was a sunny, beautiful day just like this. It was about 78 degrees. It was an early cool, it wasn't 95 like it is today. And my building principal, Dr. Hardebeck, and her 3 assistants were all out of the building. They were on some Lincoln Center retreat. She called Coach Isaac Marsh and myself, and she said, Marsh, Melega, need a favor from you guys. I got subs. You're going to be principals tomorrow. I was like, what? She's like, Melega, you're principal. Isaac, your assistant. You guys just autopilot, just run the show. I'm like, Dr. Hardebeck, are you serious? She's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, man. What do we got to do? She's like, well, just be around and make sure things run and it'll be okay. Awesome. So I come to school and, we ring the bells. We rang them at 8:35 at that time. We got all the students out of the lobby. And I went into Dr. Hardebeck's office, and Coach Marsh came in, and we sat down. We both put our feet up on her desk, something we would have never dared to do if she was present in the room. And I called her the principal's secretary, a lady named Rosemary. So Rosemary, we're going to order a couple pizzas. Isaac and I each want a large pepperoni and cheese, and just get one for yourself. She's like, well, where are we going to get those from? I'm like, where do we have an account? We got one at Alfredo's? Call Tony and let's get some free pizzas sent up here. She's like, well, how are you going to pay for it? I'm like, the principal's slush fund. Rosemary, all right, we're going to take 20 bucks, we're going to buy 3 pizzas. Well, Bill, you can't do that. I'm like, Rosemary, we have a slush fund, dear. I know we do, so let's just order some pizza. She's like, but you're not the principal. I'm like, well, actually, today I am. So this is how we're going to play this. And we were joking and kidding around, and all of a sudden our media specialist came in and said, Marsh, Melega, get in here, you got to see this. And at the time, we didn't have computers and screens. We had like little crappy TVs in the corner of each classroom. And we had like a big box TV on like a roller cart in the media center. And we were looking at the smoke coming from, the first hit. And like everybody else in the world at the time, has anybody ever flown into LaGuardia? I hate flying into LaGuardia. If you fly into LaGuardia, what do you see? Well, water and buildings. It looks like you're going to land Sully style, like, oh my God, they're building, you can reach out and like touch them. Everything looks very, very close. So like everyone else, we thought, one window, LaGuardia, you see Jake's old house, and the other window you see like downtown Manhattan, Long Island or something, right? It's out there somewhere, whatever. All right? And we thought it was a horrible accident where a plane taking off or landing in LaGuardia slammed into one of the towers. This was horrible. And so we're standing there dumbfounded, and I'm like, what do I get on the intercom? Do I not? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, Coach Marsh grabbed my shoulder, and I turned and looked and saw the second plane. If you want to take a look at the newspaper here, we saw the second plane hit live. And at that point, instantly in my mind, I got real calm, and I'm like, okay, it's no longer an accident. This was intentional. It's an act of war. Problem is, who committed the attack? We simply didn't know. And so when I think back on that day and all those emotions, the place went berserk right away here at Chapel Hill. The switchboards clicked on. We had an old, switchboard with red lights when the phones aren't being used, and then green. Every phone line, parents were coming to get their kids. I'm like, really, we're in Chapel Hill, but Sharon Harris, people were afraid, Fort Bragg, the big gas tanks over between Greensboro and Winston-Salem. People were tripping, and I'm like, awesome. Got on the intercom, I told everybody I'm going to ring the bell to go to second period. However, there is, an event going on in New York. If you want to turn on your TV and just sit in class, that's great. And at that time, my principal came back and said, Melega, give me the microphone. Don't announce what's happening. I'm like, well, too late, man. I'm already have. And that was here, all right? Safe in our little, utopian bubble of Chapel Hill, all right? We were not on the ground in New York. And I think back on big historical events, and the things that when they happened, you know where you were exactly when the event happened. And you think the big tragedies. Number one is December 7th, 1941. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. You go 22 years ahead or so, and you get the assassination of President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. The president is shot in the head, and they had a cutaway from like the CBS, NBC, and ABC cameras. 5 years later, Dr. Martin Luther King is assassinated on his balcony in a hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. So you've got back-to-back assassinations, icons of American history and politics. And then we go to 1986. So I'm finally alive in 1986. And I remember we were in the gym. We were standing on our little logo, which was a big G, and we were looking at the little box TV, several hundred of us. And we were going to watch the Space Shuttle Challenger take off in January of 1986, because for the first time a civilian was going up into outer space. A school teacher, Kristen McCullough from New Hampshire, an 8th grade science teacher, won a contest. She was going to go into space and perform an experiment. I was in science class, we went down, and we watched the Space Shuttle Challenger explode. We're like, oh my God, what just happened? Local connection, the runner-up to get in the space shuttle was former Chapel Hill High math teacher, a guy named Bud Stewart. He was Kristen. If she couldn't go, he was going. He was there that day, and I will never forget, we all just stood there in stark silence. But we were safe, far removed from Cape Canaveral, Honolulu, Memphis, Tennessee, Dallas, Texas, whatever. And the Pearl Harbor attack claimed 2,335 American lives, sailors, soldiers, doctors, nurses at the Schofield Barracks Hospital, and citizens in Honolulu. And the Japanese didn't just plan, as you'll hear about this year, they didn't just dream up the Pearl Harbor attack overnight. Attacks like this are extremely complex. They take a lot of detailed, planning and logistics. The Japanese were rehearsing the Pearl Harbor attack back in 1931. So they were working on the plan for a decade before they executed it in Honolulu. Well, Al-Qaeda, the terrorist group, and I did say terrorist group, all right? I know Chapel Hill, but sometimes it is what it is. The terrorist group Al-Qaeda had been planning the thing for about 8 or 9 years. The 9/11 attacks were their second attack, their second attempt on the World Trade Centers. Visible signs in the nation's biggest city of world economic power, all right? New York City, America's city. You know that I heart New York, everybody loves New York, and you know, and if you've been to New York, it's, you know, it's a city. I mean, yeah, it's big and it's nice, but people, why are people always so gruff there? Well, wouldn't you be, you know, gruff if you lived in New York? All right. Think of trying to walk down the hallways here at the high school. Imagine walking down the sidewalk. You got to go like a bulldozer. All right. They're just big city people. But on that day, I think they changed. And if we go back, here they are again, towering over Manhattan. Got a little sailboat down here, you know, the mighty Hudson River. And I remember in high school, we got to go to New York City. Our history teacher, Mr. Brockett, got us into the UN. The whole thing was funded. And we were going to watch a debate between the ambassadors from Iran and Iraq, who were engaged in the decade-long Iran-Iraq war. The two delegates actually got into like a shoving match on stage in the General Assembly. We're like, well, I thought this is all diplomatic. But our first stop from tiny little Garrettsville, Ohio, was going to the World Trade Centers. All right, remember I got off the bus. It was about 11 o'clock. I got a hot dog, you know, a little country boy. Got a little hot dog from a street vendor. It was like the best hot dog I've ever had. And we're, you know, biggest thing in town was like Farmer Clapp's silo, where I'm from. All right, woo! All right, we're going big. All right, and we go to the top, and they have, you know, chain link fence, and you can look like, oh man, there's the Hudson, and there's, you know, Giant Stadium, and there's the harbor out there. No, there's the UN down the corner. This is really awesome. And I walked out on the catwalk. There was a little plaque from the knucklehead who tried to do the cable walk across. And I remember looking down at the building, and I saw it doing this. And I was like, oh my God, the building's going to break in half. It's too big. And I ran into the elevator, and I started pointing down, down, down. And the elevator guy started laughing. Kid, what's the matter with you? You got my little Leatherman coat on, and I'm, you know, all thinking I'm tough. And he's like, you afraid of heights? And I'm like, no, but the building's going to break. Man, it's moving. Can't you feel it? He's like, look. It's a tall building, it's made to bend and sway, all right, you're going to be all right. I'm like, I don't care, down, Ace, let's go. All right. And I have my pictures from up there, because I mean, it was cool, but I didn't understand architecture and like physics at that point. And if you look at the trade centers, is how big they were. One is 1,368 feet. Its, you know, sister is 1,362 feet. They are 110-story buildings. Here we are on the second floor of the high school. We're at a 2-story building. Add 108 more of these. They're huge. They dominate. You couldn't get lost. All you had to do was find a little alleyway, look up, find the World Trade Centers, and you could orient yourself. 200,000 tons of American U.S. Steel was in them. 46,300 windows. Not like little tiny, like big giant windows.
Is that in each or both?
What's that?
Is that in each or both?
Each. All right. 12,000 miles of electrical cable. I always love that one because if you envision 12,000 miles of electrical cable, it's like laying cable in New York City, unrolling it to Los Angeles, going back to New York, back to Los Angeles, and then almost back to New York again. It's like 4 trips across the country. They were so big they had their own zip code. There's the Island of Manhattan zip code and then the World Trade Center zip code. All right? Hundreds of nations had offices and businesses, shipping, receiving, buying, selling. Stuff, people were everywhere. It was like a great miniature of New York City or like a cosmopolitan, like Istanbulish area. I mean, you could see every, race, background, religion, you name it, was going in and out of those buildings. And they dominated, pop culture. You couldn't watch a movie or a TV show in the 1970s without seeing the World Trade Centers. 1979, King Kong is remade, and he doesn't climb the Empire State Building, he climbs the World Trade Centers. Tobey Maguire in the Spider-Man remakes, he catches the Green Goblin's little helicopter in between the World Trade Centers, and they were awesome. Everyone loved it. But what a lot of people forget is back in February of 1993 was the first attempt on the World Trade Centers, where an Al-Qaeda member, the blind cleric, explodes a car bomb in the basement of one of the Twin Towers. My little sister just left about an hour beforehand. And the blast will kill 7 people. It will injure 1,042 more. It'll take out some concrete, bend some rebar, rip up some electrical lines. We've got 7 fatalities, 1,042 injured, but the structure of the building, nothing. All right, there's a hole, but we can, rebar, concrete, we'll fix that. It didn't really damage the structural integrity. So we're going to do a little Jason Curtis, I'm doing my Curtis imitation, nobody's laughing. My Curtis imitation. We're going to do a little physics experiment. Mr. Jansen, come on down. I would use Jake, but it may not quite work if I use Jake. All right. All right. Everybody, this is Will Jansen. If you don't know Will, all right. Will's baseball player, basketball player. Will, stand there in a nice athletic stance. All right, we got Will's slightly taller than I am, yes.
Yes.
And I'm slightly probably heavier than Will, maybe by pound or 2, maybe. All right. Will's coach says get in a nice athletic stance, nice wide base, right? Here's Will's athletic stance. Take my right arm. I'm going to push on Will, and let's see how he moves. Like, don't, react. Don't, just be natural. All right. Will kind of moves a little bit, right? But not much. Now put your feet real close together, Will. Now Will's feet are real close together. I do the same push, and what happens to Will? All right. So one more time. Feet together. Will goes over. Feet apart. Will. And Will barely moves. Thank you, sir. That's called physics. All right, there you go. They tried to attack it at its wide base, and nothing happened. But if we can hit it up high and get it leaning like I thought it would when I was a little high school kid up there, it might just completely fall over like I thought back in the mid-1980s. So a new leader of Al-Qaeda, a guy named Osama bin Laden, a rich Saudi billionaire, begins to recruit and fund for some perceived and some, real, what he thought was slights to his and his organization's honor. It's a nebulous web we can get into later. And he recruits and he gets 19 guys, 4 Egyptians and 14 other Saudis. Most of them were educated. Some of them had engineering and medical degrees. And they begin to research, well, how can we topple these buildings? So with enough force, enough momentum, if we could shove one over like Will, they might topple. But how do we do that? Where do you get an explosive to generate enough force to make that happen? You couldn't buy a bomb. There wasn't a projectile that would do it. And then they thought of airplanes. And the airplanes just might do it. And out in Missouri, there was an FBI agent, I believe it was Missouri, who was screaming and yelling that he was tracking these guys with expired student visas that were flying back and forth across the country. Some of them were taking pilot training, and when he interviewed their instructors, they said they were asking to learn how to take off and steer the plane. They were not asking to learn how to land. There was such a disconnect in the federal government intelligence services, FBI, CIA, DIA, NIA, NSA, go on and on and on and on, that it never really got to the right person. And we know they came in from Portland, Oregon, or Portland, Maine, excuse me, got down to Boston, where plane tickets were bought on 4 cross-country flights. And you get a plane fully loaded with people with enough jet fuel to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, plus you got to have some extra in case of emergencies. The wings are full of jet fuel. Jet fuel is highly explosive, and from Boston to New York is just not that far. Even by car, it's just not that far. By air, it's less than, and it's a very quick flight. And so at 7:59 a.m., Mohammed Atta, the ringleader, and a couple guys will take off from Boston Logan Airport, headed for LAX in California. 15 minutes later, at 8:14, United Airlines Flight 175 also departs Boston, headed for Los Angeles. Down the coast in Washington, D.C. at Dulles Airport, Flight 77 departs Washington, also headed for LA at 8:20. So in 21 minutes, we have 3 planes in the air. Shortly thereafter, at 8:42, United Flight 93 takes off from Newark, New Jersey, headed for San Francisco, the 4th plane. And all of a sudden, the first 2 begin to turn, and phone calls began to come in. Something's wrong. We're climbing too high. We've heard some shouting in the front, and we're turning in the wrong direction. The terrorists had box cutters. They had, attacked a few flight attendants and broken into the cockpit, and were climbing the plane really high, around 50,000 feet, a little higher. Then they began to nosedive at almost terminal velocity. People said they saw sheet metal tearing off, just barely shallow enough not to have the plane come apart in the air. Well, at 8:40, the FAA had heard reports, people calling on the plane phones, that there's something wrong. They didn't know what to do. So they call North American, Space Air Command, NORAD, out in, Colorado, and they said, hey, we think Flight 11 from Boston may be hijacked. People are like, whatever, you can't hijack planes anymore. That just can't happen. 180 seconds go by. 8:43, another call comes in. Hey, we're getting a second report, and now sightings of 2 planes deviating from their flight path headed towards New York City. Both planes have been hijacked. Oh crap. Crucial seconds have gone by. What do you do? Who do you call? Do you call Pentagon? Do you call the FAA? Do you call the Air Force? Do you call the President, who's in Sarasota, Florida, reading Goodnight Moon to kindergarten kids at an elementary school? What do you do? Well, Space Command takes over, and 2 F-22 Raptors are scrambled from Falmouth, Massachusetts to get there and intercept. And trust me when I tell you, an F-22 can fly really, really, really fast. The first and only Generation 5, fighter jet in the world. It doesn't matter, because they can't get there fast enough. And if they did, what do? Do you follow the planes? Do you shoot them down? Like, who's going to make that call? If they're scrambling and getting off the ground in Massachusetts, Flight 11 slams into the North Tower. And here's where, we're trying to order pizza, and we think it's a horrible accident. Oh my God. And then at 9:03, 17 minutes later, you see the second plane hit live, and everyone begins to panic. You don't really know exactly what to do. Second plane hit live. And the world watches, kind of in like numb shock. And at 9:58, after burning for 56 minutes, the South Tower collapses. There's a guy, I know he speaks at St. Thomas More sometimes into some Boy Scout groups. He lives in town. He was there, and he was in the South Tower giving a business presentation. And when the first plane hit, he stopped. And they're like, look, you got to continue on with your presentation. We're not going to give you the job. He's like, I don't care. There's an emergency. We got to get out of here. And he goes to the elevator on the 108th floor, and he hit the button. He was waiting. He's like, oh, the heck with this. I'm taking the stairs. He got down 8 flights to the 108th floor, and the second plane hit. Because if I stayed where I was, I would have died. But everybody up here is trapped. There's no way to get out. And he goes, I was one of the last ones in the South Tower. And he goes, it was amazing. It was very orderly. People were well-mannered. It was a pawn shop dream. Off to the side, there were Louis Vuitton handbags, I guess. They were nice or whatever. There were shoes, there were cell phones, there were briefcases, there were computers, and everyone was just going down the stairs, encouraging helping those that couldn't make it. And he goes, we got to, pretty low, and we smelled and felt the fire beginning to burn. We got to about floor 25, and a group of firemen were coming up. And this is my personal opinion. I think the word hero is overused nowadays. Everybody's a hero. You get a cat out of a tree, and you're a hero. Hero is something larger than that. And he said he looked at one of the firemen and said, look, sir, there's nothing you can do for them. And the fireman looked at him and said, I know, but we have to try. As I looked him dead square in the eye, and he looked at me, and both of us knew at that moment that fireman was never getting out of that building. That's a hero, not getting a cat out of a tree or some nonsense. And 56 minutes later, the South Tower, as was pre-planned, collapses in on it. So it's like taking a milk jug and just shoving it down. The South Tower collapses. At 10:28, half hour later, after burning for 102 minutes, the North Tower collapses. And what was once icons of world trade and power is now a big hole in the ground where blocks and blocks and blocks are covered with dust. We had a teacher here at the time. Her brother walked across the Brooklyn Bridge home, and when he got to his yard, there were papers in his yard. He lived 6 miles from the World Trade Centers. He found paper from the World Trade Centers on his front lawn. He never went back. He's like, oh, I'm done. He moved to like the Caribbean somewhere. But that wasn't it. In between the two towers collapsing at 9:43, Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. It came in, turned sideways, and knifed its way into the west side of the Pentagon, knocking its way through 3 of the 5 concentric wings of the Pentagon. A pre-planned, premeditated attack that had taken years to plan. 27 minutes later, half hour later, the west side of the Pentagon falls. And while that is going on, Flight United 93, it turns over Cleveland, Ohio, turns around in a big wide arc, and it's heading back. It was near Pittsburgh, and its intended target was the Capitol building. And there's a famous phone call, a guy named Jeremy Glick, who had just finished his paternity leave. He had a young daughter. She had turned 3 months old. This was his first business trip back to work. CNN is running specials talking about the children of the people who were born, whose parents died in the attack. And he calls his wife and says, hey dear, I love you. The plane has been taken over. We're going to try and take it back. I love you. Give my daughter a kiss. And you hear him say, let's roll. And the phone hangs up. And they took the drink cart and they slammed their way into a couple of the terrorists. A couple guys beat them up, and they used the cart as a battering ram, broke into the cockpit, but the plane was already in an irreversible dive, and they chose to let it go and fly into the ground than risk it hitting a populated area. Just outside of Pittsburgh in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, is where Flight United 93 crashes. Know a guy, his name was Scott, who recovered that black box, and he said the things that the federal government, like martial law was declared, Constitution, Bill of Rights, all of that was put on hold while we were dealing with what was going on. And in the final aftermath, 19 terrorists will die in the attack, as will 2,996 other people, mostly Americans, but from other nations. 246 die in the planes, 2,606 in the towers in and around Manhattan, and the rescue personnel, policemen, firemen, paramedics, who perish in the crash as well, and 125 in the Pentagon. So just recently, I was one of those guys who said when it happened, build them right back. Even though they were kind of ugly, build them just the same, but make them like 10 feet taller. All right, like screw you, Al-Qaeda. That did not happen, and the Freedom Tower Center was opened. It is a beautiful building. It is much classier, and the Memorial Garden underneath is something to see. That's just happened in the last year or so. So that is the quick timeline of what happened on that day. How much time do we have? About 10 minutes. Well, I got some other video. If I can get it to play, I got to switch out on the computers here. But it's the good story of a doctor who goes down, and you kind of see the aftermath, the dust cloud that Wesley was talking about. Before I switch out, you guys have any questions or anything kind of strike you that you want to talk about, ask about, or you guys all? Okay, all right. The other thing that happened, I think, you know, it happened the same after Pearl Harbor. We were talking about machismo and why do guys go fight wars. Well, I think, you know, we talk about New York City and its cosmopolitan nature, and at that moment in time, I think of that lady cradling that person to her chest. Your race, the color of your skin, your religion, your gender orientation, none of that mattered. The people in New York City, across the country, and even the world were kind of in shock. And the support that they gave, the country was amazing. And I know I'm going to speak blasphemy here. I know he's much vilified here in the hallowed town of Chapel Hill. But I think of presidents, and what's going on? Is this showing up on the big screen? Please tell me it is.
Yeah. It's setting up now.
Yeah, it's setting up. All right. Please work. All right, yeah. President Bush, you can see him sitting, he's reading Goodnight Moon in like a rocking chair, and an aide comes in and whispers in his ear. And he's like, bah. You see the look on his face, and you think of, there's been 44 presidents. And I think of like President Lincoln with the Civil War, President Roosevelt on December 7th. Then you think of like, you're the president, and you hear that the World Trade Centers have just been attacked. What's your move? Like, what do you do? Like, can you call anybody? This had never happened before. He's like, oh, shiitake mushrooms. I'm sure it was a little stronger than that. They rush him back, and I give him credit. He wanted to go back to Washington, get me back. They're like, no, Mr. President. They blew up the Pentagon, da-da-da-da-da. And they took him to Omaha, Nebraska, like middle of nowhere. And remember, the Secret Service, they don't work for the president. They work for the Treasury, and they use their safety protocols. But he gets back within the next day, and I'll read you a little paragraph of his speech, which, President Bush was not. We were talking about articulate public speakers. He's not a good public speaker. He's just not. I think he would even tell you that. But this was a pretty good speech. I'm going to read you the last paragraph. So this is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so again. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good in the world. And he says, we are going to get those responsible. Wherever you are hiding, whatever rock or crevice you are in, we are going to find you wherever you are. If I make a mistake and we go somewhere where you aren't, blame me and me alone. I'm accountable. You don't hear a lot of powerful people. If I screw up and I send you where you're not supposed to, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, God bless America, and good night. 1 second, Eli. And I think this video I'm about to show you after Eli's question kind of demonstrates that, we are all Americans. We are in this together. Mr. Zachary.
I did a project on that speech in English last year, and there was nothing about if we make a mistake, it's all my fault in the speech.
Okay. All I got is I'm reading it from Speeches That Changed the World. So I don't know. Either mine is wrong or spruced up, or I don't know. But I'm reading it. So anyway. He says that standing on top of the Pentagon, is when he said that one. Here we go. Oh, flapjacks, hang on.
Coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind the car. I can see it only here. This is incredible. Okay, I'm going to go find people who need help. I don't think I'm one of them. You okay, sir? Okay. Okay. Back to you. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, come over here. Are you okay? Yeah.
Anybody need a doctor? Don't have oxygen. Hey, that guy needs some oxygen if someone can share it with him. 10-4. Thanks.
I'm going to let this play. I just Googled it. The address I read was his address to the nation. They added in his impromptu bullhorn speech at ground zero. So Eli, you are correct. So I don't want to give out erroneous information.
The fireman you see in that cloud. Here's his story.
This, how I got this, I went home that night and I put a tape in this archaic device called a VCR and just let it play. And so I stayed up all night watching TV, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, CBS, BBC, whatever I could find. And this is, I think, the best story of the night. So,
I'm a New York City firefighter. As the situation deteriorated and I was observing all these different phenomena happening, there was loud popping noises from Tower 2. Windows were being blown out under high pressure. It was like a bang, bang, bang. I jumped over a railing and then dropped approximately 8 feet down into the down ramp into a loading dock, and then ran as fast as possible. Shortly thereafter, the same noises, the same sounds from the North Tower were going off again. The next thing I knew, I was lying in the middle of the street, didn't know if I was going to get through it, couldn't breathe. I remembered initially in the operation I had secured a mask, which I almost forgot about. The first breath of fresh air, as filthy as it was, tasted so great. So at that point, I felt as long as this building doesn't come down upon me, then somehow I could get out of this black tornado that we were dealing with. As all the blackness had lifted, I saw a figure come toward me. I didn't realize he was a doctor.
You okay, sir? Okay. Can I just get a toot off your respirator? Can I get a toot?
Students will need to use their Chapel Hill High School student ID to open the exterior doors on campus. Mr. Walker is available during lunch to make the ID card. The ID room is located by the nurse's office. Again, beginning Monday, September 12th, students will need to use their IDs to open the exterior doors.
this Sunday, take a few minutes to reflect on what happened, how it changed the world. We kind of ran out of time. Also, if you haven't talked to grandma, grandpa, brother, sister in a while, pick up the phone. All right, you don't want to be, you know, life happens. So just be careful. I'm going to hit play until the bell rings. Have a great weekend. I do need to see Vocal and Sergio for like 20 seconds. So, all right, here we go.
I'm getting a couple of clean breaths.
He was gasping for breath. And he just asked to share my air supply. And of course, whatever I could have done, you know, we both shared the air there. But he just stayed there very, very shortly and just went about just going to the next person to help and the next person after that. And he was just unstoppable. He was just great. You could see shapes and hear like the high-pitched sounds of the firefighters' personal alarms going off in the distance. This cloud lifted, then you could see just firefighters overcome not being able to get their masks on so quickly. You couldn't breathe, you couldn't see. It's a sound that nobody will ever forget. As I was working my way back toward my unit, the surrounding area was just so devastated. Just tried to make it back.
So you see those guys and those beacons, the guys who are alive, their beacons aren't going off. The beacons are a strobe light and a noise if you are trapped. The only thing you heard on that street was beacons, beacons, beacons. So where do you begin to recover? You know, then we think of like Nice, and we think of Brussels, and we think of, you know, we just had the earthquake down in the terrorist attacks, and the earthquake in Italy. And when something like that happens, where do you start? You know, so I mean, it took, I would say, until Thanksgiving for things to start. I don't want to say return to like normal, but when things just kind of, you know, calmed down. The NFL took the week off, and then, you know, because you think stadiums are a big, fat, juicy target. I think the World Series, Kurt Gibson, or was it Kurt? No, it wasn't Kurt Gibson. Who was it? Hit a home run, and it just took time. Well, anyway, speaking of time, we're out of time. I'll see you guys Monday. Matt, can you hit stop for me?